your present heading. Maintain 3,500 till established on the localizer. Cleared the ILS 32 approach.
I have three pieces of advice that I give in my talk about professional techniques for GA pilots. One is stay inside the envelope, and that's the envelope I'm talking about. The flight manual, the insurance rules, they have those rules for a reason. They have certain things they don't want you doing because their actuaries have determined that those are risky things and they're going to wind up having to pay for some kind of accident. They don't want to do that. The advisory circulars, rental agreements, FARs, AM, everything. If you stay within that, that's the envelope. Stay within the envelope. And then tighten it up a little bit. Set your own standards. If you're supposed to wear oxygen above 12.5, make it 10,000.
Yeah.
If you're allowed to take off with 0.0, make it half a mile. Yeah. If you're IFR, VFR and limit is 3 miles, make it 5 miles. And then don't break those. And I think you mentioned in your book to have this and utilize a flight instructor to oversee it and sign it and know what your limits are. So if you can be held accountable if someone else is out there helping you stay with your standards. I think it's a great idea to have and use 121 instead of 91, so to close in those limitations and make your own personal limitations. But personal limitations don't work if you don't use them. It's kind of like the treadmill in my bedroom. You can't just buy a treadmill and have it sit there.
Yeah.
You to make it work. And so same with these standards. And it's easier for a pilot to adhere to these standards if someone is watching them and holding them accountable. So that I liken that to having a trainer at the gym, so to speak. If someone's expecting you to do something a certain way, you're more likely to do it that way. So that's one of the things, is staying in the envelope. The second thing is 2 speeds. I tell every pilot, even my co-pilots, when I'm flying an airline flight, if it's a student, I tell them in a Cessna 172 or my Citauri, any airplane I'm flying, if I'm flying with another pilot, whether it be just for fun and we're both either arguably PIC, who knows, or it's a crew environment where I'm the captain and I have a first officer, I say this: we can operate at one of 2 speeds, slow or screw up. Choose.
Yeah, that's great.
If I see you operating at that second speed, I'm going to rein you in. And if you see me operating at that second speed, you rein me in, please. Don't rush to comply with ATC. I mean, how often have you been told, clear for an immediate takeoff, no delay, traffic on final?
It's happened quite often, yeah.
Good policy? No, wait.
Yeah, is that sort of your default each time? Just like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wait. I don't want to rush. Don't let ATC rush you.
Right.
A lot of people rush to comply with ATC, and it's pilot in command, not controller in command. So I tell people, don't rush to comply. If you can do it, you're all ready to go, great. But if you have to rush, that's when accidents happen. In fact, when I was teaching in a simulator, I used to tell my students, okay, I'm going to time you doing the go-around procedure. You do it as fast as you can. I timed him. It was like 20 seconds. I said, now just do it really slow with a 1001, 1002. In between every step, it was like 23 seconds.
Yeah.
The difference was 3 seconds longer, but they're not making mistakes. They're slow and comfortable and methodical.
Yeah.
It's the third thing I teach is remove your inner passenger from your PIC. That's one thing the airlines have. I've heard you mention, in fact, I think you did yesterday, the safety record at the airlines. We build our SOPs with every accident. Sadly, they're written in blood. Right. And we at the airlines have a much better safety record, and it's for a number of reasons. The redundancy, having 2 pilots, we have the same airports, we have better equipment, all these reasons. But I think the important takeaway here is that I, as an airline captain, don't care if you in row 10 have to get to a wedding tonight. Mm-hmm. I do care, but I don't use that as part of my decision when it comes to safety. Right. And when a pilot is his own passenger, you're flying yourself somewhere to get somewhere in time to a meeting or whatever, a party or a game, you now have a vested interest in getting to your destination and get there right as it sets in. So if you as a PIC can remove your passenger from your inner PIC and become the pilot only, put your passenger self in the back or the cargo compartment or something, you can't hear yourself pressuring yourself to get there. Yeah. JFK Jr. That's it makes room for in your head for a single pilot to become the pilot monitoring.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. That's really great stuff. Like what you just said right there. I've never heard it said that way, and it's really making me think, for an airline pilot, you're not really going anywhere, I guess. Right? I mean, you're going, but you're just running a trip, right? That's a huge
We're,
distinction.
yeah, we're not happy till you're not happy. Who here had an airline pilot really tick them off by being delayed?
Yeah.
And it wasn't just to make you upset. It was because there was probably a good reason for it. You just don't go until everything is ready.
Right, right. But I mean that you yourself, like if you're running a trip to, let's say your trip is to Portland, to Seattle, you know, San Francisco and back home or whatever, you're running that trip. It's not like you're going to Portland to see your best friend. You're working the trip, and you're going to work it as safely and as diligently as you can. But that's really interesting what you just said, that there's really no vested interest in personally for you getting to Portland necessarily, other than delivering the airplane and the crew and the people there safely.
Yeah, which I do take pride in. It's just that that aspect is removed from the decision making, the aspect of why I have to get there.
Yeah, it's a tough one in GA, and I think the only strategy, and this is one, I don't know if you caught our week on aeronautical decision making, but it was like I just started telling stories about mistakes I've made and things I've done and that I would never do again. And I still make mistakes like this, even after more than 20 years of doing this professionally. And I think the only thing I've found to be effective in GA is to really buffer the time. Like if I need to be there on Saturday, maybe I plan to head down on Thursday, you know, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. And that takes it back to my 2 speeds. The only way to feel comfortable operating at a really slow speed, leave early.
Yeah.
Whenever you can, the day before, and give yourself the whole day to travel and have your event the next day. It gives so much room to come out to the airplane, find a flat tire, or oh, I need to do this, or oh, the airplane's not fueled, need oil, whatever. And then you start rushing with every little compound. If you can give yourself that much extra time and time for a backup plan so that if you could drive, if you had to, that you have plenty of time.
Yeah, that's huge, because I think it influences everything downstream. I mean, the story you were telling about being in the Champ, right, lined up on the runway, and that the wind picked up the wing, and you said, you know what, I'm going to scrub this. Those decisions are so much harder to make if you have to be in a wedding in 3 hours, right? Like if, you know, that's a really tough call to make. You probably just go, and that's the unsafe part.
Good point. Yeah. Absolutely. And that's what I read about those people.
Yeah. Do you know of anything, like any other good tips that jump to your mind about how to get that passenger out of the PIC other than time buffers?
I think mentally getting yourself, removing the passenger from your head, I think that has helped a lot of my students, and then operating really slow. You know, it's a tough call. It's a tough way to do that, especially a business person that's flying himself to his own meeting.
Right.
That's just a danger zone. Maybe bring another pilot.
Well, that played into the Tesla crash we were talking about. I mean, and by the way, one of my colleagues up there did their IPC the day before that crash, unfortunately. And for anybody watching, IPC is Instrument Proficiency Check. So he basically, a CFI that I know, reinstated their instrument privileges. And when I talked to him, he's a great CFI, by the way. When I talked to him, he said they were top notch. Didn't make one mistake, you know, that he had no issue signing off the IPC. And the next day they go out, it's 0-0 conditions. They end up taking off and crashing, like we said. But I know they had a meeting in Southern California that morning around 11 a.m.
Wow. I know the next pilot to crash and kill himself, I don't know who it's going to be, but I'll tell you this I know about him. He's probably a really nice guy. He's probably a great pilot. Probably doesn't take chances. And if you ask him if he's flies hazardously, he'd probably say, no, I don't.
Yeah.
But the other day, I had an aircraft take off out of Santa Paula here, a Cardinal with too much air in the fuel tanks, and there's no excuse.
You can't make me laugh like that when I drink coffee.
Yeah, I was.
That was well timed.
There's no excuse for that. I mean, there's so many things that if you just make hard and fast rules, like you said, use standards. I mean, he had flown across country, came in, landed, did some pattern work, and then he was going to had lunch, and he was going to depart and leave. He had nothing in the tank. Always leave topped off. I call the fuel truck out to top off with a student pilot, even if it only takes 3 gallons a side. I want them to feel it when they stick their finger in the tank. If they don't feel fuel, we're topping off.
Yeah.
And no excuse. When they go across country, I want them topping off. And I tell them it's because I want to see the receipt prove that they were there. But that's not really it. Nowadays, it's easy to tell. But I want them leaving full. What if they come back and there's a marine layer? Now they got to fly an hour inland.
Right.
There's nothing as useless as the fuel not in your tanks. Yeah. So that's one of them. There's a lot of things you can do. We all make errors. There's so many things we can do to trap these errors, and that's kind of what the SOPs do.
Yeah.
Is it's barrier, like you mentioned, I think yesterday, to trap your air, or it was in your book. One of the two. I've heard you say this. One of the things, little tips you asked for, like I have my students always pull the airplane forward a few feet to check the tops or bottoms all the way around the tires when they're pre-flight.
Right.
It's not to check the tires. It's so that they never taxi out of the parking spot with a tie down.
I like it. I like it. That's good.
So
well, it's certainly it's a double purpose. You know, and I think all of these little like SOPs that you're describing, you know, like one that jumped to my mind when you were just talking is Richard, my old CFI, would never let me take my hand off the tow bar while it was still connected to the nose wheel. And even if all I was doing was walking to the door to grab a flashlight or something, I would have to disconnect the tow bar, put it on the ground, walk to the door, get the flashlight, come back and reconnect the tow bar. Little procedures like that. I mean, that's what you were talking about with the pros, right? That unfortunately it's written in blood. But every accident that happens, the company survives. We figure out little procedures, little things Richard taught me, and it gets passed down or whatever it is, and it prevents us from making those same mistakes.
Yep, I like that. And the walk around, the final 360 or the final walk around, I think you referred to. Every one of my students does that. And I read that, and I'm like, yeah, that's cool to see that you talk about that, because that's the gross error check. That's we just open the dipstick and the oil check door. We open the cargo compartment. Then I have them take a big step back, walk a big circle around the airplane, get the big picture. Oh, there's a wing missing. You know, you might not catch that. You know, it's the forest through the tree.
Well, yeah, I mean, but really, like, that's the thing about the pre-flight. I mean, we could go into the weeds on this, but it's like, I always feel like, scientifically speaking, the airplane could have been perfect before we got there, right? It was tied up beautifully, the fuel caps are on, the dipstick's in. Now, all of a sudden, we get out there, and without any redundancy really at all, we start running around, pulling things out, taking the fuel caps off, checking the little rubber grommets, and taking the dipstick out. So where's the check against the check? You know, and the final walk-around can also be that. It's just, did you put the fuel caps back on? Did you put the dipstick back in? Are the doors all still on the airplane?
The tow bar. We've all seen that picture of the 172 landing with the tow bar still attached to the nose wheel. Such easy insurance.
Right.
Other things, there's so many. Like, I have my students, whenever they do the run-up, I have them look outside and we play a game. I want you to hit 1,700 RPM without looking at the tack. Look out the window and see if you can hit 1,700 RPM. And we guess. And they wind up, after a few lessons, getting very close. I don't care if they can hit 1,700 RPM without looking, but they're looking out the window. So if the airplane starts rolling when they're adding all that power, they're going to.
Yeah, that's good. And it's good training, getting them used to kind of hearing it too. There's all sorts of things they're learning there.
Look up in the sky, there you are. Look up in the sky, there you are. Floating like an angel on the airwaves, or falling like a raven in the afternoon